Thanks for joining me today for the Sewing Summit. And this episode is going to be on going through your stash of scraps and little pieces of fabrics that you might have. I do a lot of quilt binding, and so I have a lot of different strips. So we're going to go through and work on busting your stash of scraps, and we're going to do a couple of different quilt squares. This one is the first one. It is a crazy scrappy square is what I call it, or a crazy scrappy block. And then we're going to do similar to the one of the quilt behind me. This one is a log cabin style block. So we're going to be working on that today. So those are the two blocks that I'm going to show you guys how to make. And while you're looking for your scraps, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Shankari, and I'm the Soul Sister. And I started sewing when I was a young girl. I was about 6 or 7 years old, and my parents both sew. Their professions are both related to sewing. My mom worked for a long time in a suit factory, and then my father worked as a upholsterer for automobiles, like old antique cars, and then he did fabric upholstery for couches and chairs and that sort of thing, and then he transitioned into marine upholstery, and so he works on boats and did boat covers, sails, and the interior of the boats and stuff like that. And so I have been around sewing my entire life. And as a little girl, I remember taking a sewing needle and thread with my sister, and we would make doll clothes for our Barbies and dolls that we had when we were growing up. And so those are just some of my memories that I remember playing with sewing at a very early age. And my mom always tells me that sewing is in my blood. And so it's always been a part of me and just the way I've grown up around with my family. And so we had lots of machines in the house, plenty of sewing needles and thread available, probably 10 different seam rippers, lots of different sewing scissors and that kind of thing available to me. And so I loved it. And I just remember some of my earlier memories too of clothing that my mom and dad would make for me and my sister. And when you're growing up, you're kind of embarrassed when you have to go to school wearing things that your parents made, but now I understand the value of that and the memories that were created in those moments, and I take those with me everywhere I go. And then when I'm originally from Canada, and when I moved to America, when I got married, my parents gifted me my very first sewing machine, which is a 1960s Viking. And I still have it to this day, and I use it very often. And it was my first machine that I used to make my first quilt. And my first quilt, I gifted it to my sister, and she still has it. And I know it's something that she cherishes for every trip that she goes on. She takes it with her, and wherever she is, she always has her quilt, and she always reminds us of that whenever she talks to me about it. So I'm grateful that she's able to have those memories. And when I became a seamstress full-time was about a year and a half ago. I decided to step away from nursing. I used to be an emergency room nurse, and I decided that I was going to do sewing full-time, and that was when Soul Sister started. So the reason why I chose to become the Soul Sister is I really had on my heart to create a world of no landfill fabric. And so that is part of Soul Sister's mission, is really to work on a world and create a space in the world where there's no landfill fabric. And so the place where I create from my heart, deals with working with scrap fabric just like this that I can find either in the store or even in my own fabric stash that I can use to create from. And a lot of different manufacturing factories will actually have fabric that goes to landfill because it's flawed, or some of it got damaged during production. And that is my canvas that I create from. And so eventually, what I'd like to do with Soul Sister is collaborate with a manufacturing company and be able to offer a special, unique blend of clothing or fashion or accessories that use fabric that is either dead stock, not being used in the fashion industry, or landfill fabric that was going to be thrown away anyway, or remnant fabric that was just set aside and left over from a particular project that the company was working on. So that is my goal and eventual prospects that I see for Soul Sister going forward. So that's a little bit about where I kind of come from and why I'm on a mission to really create sustainability on the planet. So you, as a sewist or a seamstress, you have an opportunity that you can provide value to this world. And so I want to inspire you as being a soul sister yourself, that you can take your scraps and create beautiful things out of them. So that's why I focus on using those fabrics, being a conscious consumer of the fabrics, only purchasing what things that you really need and the amount or yardage of fabric that you actually just need for your project. And so when I go out and purchase fabric, I'm very specific about what I buy and how much I buy, and I focus on those kinds of things to become a conscious consumer and not just have a whole bunch of fabric laying around in my house, because it's so easy to do that, right? We can become like, I call myself a fabric monster. I just like to consume fabrics, and I love the pretty colors. I love different textures and styles of fabrics. I gravitate towards cottons because I love to quilt, and it's just such a different world. Fabric is like a special world for me. And so that's why I really want to work on creating this space where we can create from things that people are not necessarily holding on to. They might be just throwing it away. Another option that I love to support people in is creating t-shirt quilts. I love to work with fabric from clothing, and so I can make t-shirt quilts, and I also do memory bears. And what is so special about those quilts and memory bears is that when your friends and family have passed away, for example, this is an opportunity that you can create using their clothing. And to use their clothing and turn it into either a quilt, a memory quilt, or a memory bear is such an important way to preserve the memory of that person, and it allows something tangible to be created that holds value. And so it's really important to create from that space. It's very unique, and it's a way that I get to give back to families that are grieving and support them through their time of loss, and it gives them support. So that is part of the mission at Soul Sister, is number one, to create a world with no landfill fabric, and number two, to give back value and support to the people who need it the most. So I'm so excited to be on this journey with you, and I can't wait to show you how to create these beautiful blocks. So stay tuned and stay with me. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Sewing Summit. For this project, you will need 2 of your square blocks for measuring your blocks, a pair of scissors, a rotary cutter, pins or clips to secure your fabrics, and whatever scrap pieces of fabric that you have available. What is not pictured here is your iron and ironing board. So if you have those handy or have them in a storage area, just have them ready so that you're able to use them at the appropriate time. So what you basically are going to do is, with your scrap pieces, have a whole bunch of different strips made out of them. They could be thick or thin. Like these ones are 1.5 inch. And then these ones are about 3 inches. And it doesn't matter if they're short or long pieces either. Everything is gonna get used up. So the first piece that you're gonna use is gonna be more of like an actual shape, not like a strip. So for that, you would need a bigger piece of fabric for that. So what I'm going to show you is basically you want to cut it with 5 sides. Cut a piece of fabric that has 5 sides on it. Now I have 3 children, so I'm going to make a piece that includes 3 of these little Marushka dolls. Or maybe 4. We'll see what happens. And it doesn't matter what angles you use, you just want to make sure that there's 5 sides to your shape. So 1, 2, 3, and we'll do like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't have to be exact or anything, as long as it has 5 sides to it. Basically kind of like a pentagon, but like a crazy wonky pentagon. So this is basically how I start. And then take any one of your strips, depending on what you like, and attach it to one side of your crazy wonky pentagon. And what we're going to do is pin this. You can pin it, or you can use your clips, whichever one you like to use. Typically, I'm a rogue and I don't even pin at all. So I just go to my machine and just sew it down. So what you're going to do is you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along this line, and that will have one piece sewn onto your main crazy wonky pentagon. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and sew this for you guys now. So here's our pieces that I just pinned together, and I'm going to do the 1/4 inch seam along here. And you can take out your pins if you want, or if you don't want to take out your pins, just make sure you're careful about where they are so that you're not accidentally going to bust a needle, because nobody wants a broken needle. So basically we're just doing that, and I like to finger press, or we can take it to the ironing board and iron that down. And then what you do is trim off the excess. Here's my scissors. Trim off this excess piece here. And that excess piece will actually, taking it off makes your side of your pentagon with your strip to match up. They don't have to be exact, but get as close as you can. And then you've basically got a bigger pentagon, for lack of other wording around what this shape is. It's just a 5-sided shape. So we've added like this extra piece to our 5-sided shape. So it's basically elongated now to the right here. And what we're going to do next is take another piece of fabric, and let's see, I'll use this one for example, and then attach it right here to this side of our wonky 5-sided shape, and keep going. So I'm going to fast forward it a little bit, and I'm going to sew all of these pieces in place. So I'm gonna iron this shape, And I just use a dry heat. I have the steam off on my iron because if I want to touch a piece, I don't want to get burned by the steam. And you want to make sure all your seams are good. So what's happening is as you're putting on the pieces together, the seam is automatically going to go where it needs to be. So what's happening is like I'm sewing this one and then the seam is going to be towards that side to the right. And so it's always going to be to the right, depending on where you're sewing. And then on the back, it'll just easily map out for you. So you won't have seams standing up. So that's what the back looks like. You can trim up these extra pieces of string at the end. I don't worry about them. Again, I like to be a rogue and I just leave that kind of stuff on my quilt until after it's time for me to get it quilted. So we've got our pentagon and now it's grown. So we still have the 5 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we get to keep adding strips to it. And I'm gonna keep going. Basically, I'll just do one layer at a time and then go back to my iron and do that part so the seams are flattened for each side. And then I keep going until I get close to where I think it's close to 12.5 square. And then I go back to the table and my mat and then cut all the pieces so that I have a square block. So that's basically what I'm going to do. I'm just going to keep sewing now and I'll fast forward the sewing parts a little bit and then iron it. And as I keep going, I'll catch up with you when I get to the 12.5 mark. Okay. So I came back to my mat because I wanted to show you what this looks like with the square so that we can see how much fabric we still get to add to the rest of our block. And that way we realize that, you know, you don't need to be adding all the way around necessarily. You might just only need to add on 2 or 3 of the sides. And basically for this, I just keep adding more strip, 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 strip until I finish the square. Okay, here we are with our block, and you'll notice like I have this big strip right here, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to show you, I really wanted this really cute tree from this fabric on my square, and so I'm gonna fussy cut that and make sure I get that actual little piece on here, so it'll be right there. And I made sure that every corner is matched up for my 12.5 square, and then you just go across and cut everything that you don't need off and square it up. So this is how I square it up. Make sure you iron your square before you square it up because it will change shape if you iron it after, and it might be too big or kind of wonky shaped square. So iron it first and then square it up, and there you go. There's a 12.5 perfect square. So here we are with our square that we just finished, and the reason why I love this is because, like I said, we're totally scrap busting and we're just using up whatever pieces of scraps of fabrics that we have to create these blocks, and they turn out really beautiful. And what I really wanted to share with you, what I'm excited about, is I was actually part of a little group in the past couple of years. And so I have all of these blocks from different people all around the world. Isn't that amazing? Like, these are so beautiful. So some of these are from, this one's from West Virginia. So I want to share that one with you. It's really cute. And then, so each person every month sent me 2 different blocks. And then I would return 2 blocks to them. So they would have 2 of my blocks. And it was really cool because you could put things about, stuff like about you personally. So I'm originally from Canada, so I like putting in my little Canadian flag in the middle. And, you know, I have 3 kids, so I would put like specifics about my children. So you put like little detail things in there for people. These ones are from Washington. I have some from New Zealand and Australia. Like, they just turned out so beautiful. And so I just wanted to share them with you. And basically, so I have 2 for every month. And so that gives me a total of 24 blocks. And what I'm going to do is take these 24 blocks and turn them into a patchwork crazy square quilt. And so that's what my idea is for you guys to use the scrap busting squares that you create and turn them into your own quilt. So this one's going to have 24 pieces. So that would be 4 across and 6 squares down. So that would give you a pretty good throw lap size quilt. And after I complete putting them together, then I'll come back with the magic of TV and come and show you my finished quilt. And we're back. So I have all 24 of my beautiful quilt blocks from all my friends around the world in this amazing quilt now. So here's part of it. I don't know if I'm showing it to you upside down. I might be. But I wanted you to see and get an idea of what it looked like all pieced together. And one of the really cool things about using your scraps this way and connecting in with maybe your community, or you could even make a group yourself where people will share their blocks with you, is that every single quilt is going to be unique and different. There's no possibility that any quilt is going to be the same as your quilt. And so I love that because I'm basically creating a new piece of art every time I put together one of these quilts. And so these squares were from 2018. So I actually have a whole set from 2019 as well. So I have plenty of quilt blocks to work on and plenty of new quilts to be made. So I'm excited. I'll get that on my long arm quilt machine eventually. And another thing I wanted to share with you, so that's the crazy block style that we just finished working on, like this one. And I wanted to share with you about this quilt that's behind me. And I started making this quilt, I think, even before Soul Sister existed. I'll have to confirm on that, but I think that's what happened, is I actually made this quilt before I made my own business company. And so this quilt, I took as many scraps as I could find and I put it together kind of similar to the scrappy style, but you'll notice that everything is more symmetrical. So this is actually called a log cabin style quilt. And for those of you that decide to purchase the entire Sewing Summit, I will throw in a paper piecing pattern for you of this quilt. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit about how to do that style quilt. So stay with me. Okay, so in order to make the log cabin style, if you're not using a paper piecing template, we're going to be cutting 3.5 by 3.5 squares to make the center. So that is the middle piece, and we're doing 1/4 inch seam, which means your square finished will be 3 inches. So you want to make sure your scraps are a little bit bigger for this one. And then also you want to make sure that your strips are exactly 2 inches. So this piece of scrap, probably left over from some binding, it's not quite 2 inches. So that won't work. It won't create the symmetry we're looking for in our log cabin quilt. So this piece is gonna work for us. And what I'll do is I will cut this one exactly 2 inches wide. So we have a decent strip there. And what you'll do is basically the same or similar style piecing as what we did with our crazy square. Is we'll flip this over and add it to the edge of our 3.5-inch square and do a 1/4 inch seam down one side, and then we'll have this rectangle that gets created. And then when you put your next piece on, the next piece will go right underneath here. And then again, you'll go up this side of your square. And then when you finish, when you finish the second round of the square, you'll have another piece here. And when I come back to the video, I'll have that piece completed, ironed, and I'll be able to show you what that looks like. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to show you the finished block. This is what it ends up looking like. So you're gonna have your 3.5 by 3.5 square in the middle, and then your 2-inch strips all the way around, and then there are 3 strips on each side of our middle square, and so we end up with a 12 by 12 actually piece of square block that we can use to create the quilt behind me. And if you decide to purchase the Sewing Summit as a bonus, I will be throwing in a sample paper piecing pattern for you. And if you'll notice, this pattern is actually a little bit smaller than the quilt block that we did together on this video. So just be mindful of that this block will actually turn out to be about 7 by 7 inches square for you. So I just wanted to say thank you so much again for being on this journey with me, for creating from the pockets of fabric that normally wouldn't be used, and busting through your stash of old fabrics and fabrics that you may have been having and having them sit around for quite a while and not sure how to use them. This is your opportunity to create something so unique and so beautiful that will be treasured for a lifetime. So I hope you found value in today's class. If you would like to get in touch with me, I would love to hear from you. You can email me at hellosoulsister@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram and Facebook at Hello Soul Sister. And I'll make sure that they come across the screen on the bottom for you so that you can write those down and connect with me there. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much again for being a part of this journey. Have an amazing day and enjoy the rest of the Sewing Summit.